Well, welcome everyone. This is going to be our kickoff to our software supply chain security working group here at GitLab. So thank you everyone who was able to join. I have just a few items in the agenda that I wanted to go over today. So first of all, I assume you've probably already read what was presented in the merge request if you're here. But just to give a high-level overview, really our goal for this working group is to enable signing ideally by default within GitLab. And that includes everything from build artifacts to container images to packages. It definitely is a pretty lofty goal. So we're going to do our best to see how we can get there over time. But ideally, we want to not only do the signing, but we want to also be able to display in the GitLab UI and show whether or not those items are verified or unverified, show whether or not they're signed or not, so that we have that full transparency to users. I wanted to walk through a couple of the items that we're going to be starting on as part of this. The first one is this user experience for signed container registry images. And let me share my screen and I can walk through basics of this. So just to give some context, this is actually a demo that Brian put together over a year ago, I think, at this point. But right now, when users sign images and they push them up to our GitLab container registry, we don't do a great job of showing that in the UI. So we have, like here, for example, our latest tagged image, and then here's the signature for that. And you'll notice in this UI, there are a few problems. One, we show this was published 22 years ago, which isn't great. But then also, there's no way to associate this with the latest image. In fact, if I click into this and I view the details here, it's not particularly useful. It does not give me any real details about what the actual signature is. And so if I want to actually verify this signature, I would have to pull this signature down on my machine and inspect the file manually, correlate it with the latest tagged image, do that verification. So right now we're making it actually very difficult for users to see that in the UI. So what we'd like to do is, instead of showing two separate line items, we'd like to just show one. And depending on whether or not it's verified or not, if it is signed and fully verified, we'll show this badge associated with it. And we'll also add a line item here for the signature, so they can click in and view the details of the signature itself. Same thing here, if it's signed but unverified or signed and invalid. And if there's no signature at all, then we just won't show a badge. And then if they do click into view details, this is a UX mock. I ignore the content in here. This is not really accurate, but just like when you go to view the details of the signature anywhere else, like if I come in here in Chrome, I can see the certificate is valid, and then I can show details about the certificate. Any information that we can show here, we would show in that details pane. But this text is really just kind of a placeholder at the moment. And not currently in scope for this epic, but also nice to have in the future would be the ability to filter or sort by images that are signed or not. I don't think we have to add that right away. That would be a nice follow on. So although this one looks really simple, my understanding is the backend architecture of the way our container registry works is not really suited to this at the moment. We'll have to make some pretty significant changes, some database changes, because right now there's nothing associating these two objects together in any way in our database. So we would have to add that in. I'm probably misrepresenting the details that have to be happened here, but my understanding is there's actually a significant amount of work that we need to do just architecture-wise in order to have these two things associated together.
Yeah, I would have to do some research and understand a bit more about the container registry architecture to be able to estimate the level of effort. But my first thought is that it shouldn't be too difficult but those are like famous last words. I'm guessing that maybe the images are not stored in the DB. They're probably more like an S3 bucket style, so they're probably just blobs. And if that's the case, then it could be challenging. But if it's more of a traditional DB format, then it should be just a matter of creating a new table for the signatures and associating them.
Yeah, so we do have somebody who signed up for the working group as an advisor, who is on that container registry team. And so we are able to work with them to get the details on exactly like what would need to be changed there as well too. But yeah, I'm hopeful it's not too hard, but the backend team for the container registry group seems to think that there's some significant changes needed. But they have the details on what that would be for sure.
Yeah, as far as the verified signatures go, are we going to want to associate those back with a certain identity, like the group, or I don't remember how cosign does its signature format, but we should be able to verify that those images were signed from a pipeline that's like in a specific group or a specific project.
Yeah, that would be great if we could do that level of verification for this. I guess my base assumption for the verification was that I think in GitLab somewhere, I need to look up our documentation, but I think we already have a method where we can provide a list of root CAs that we trust. So I think we could just check and see if the signature was signed by one of those root CAs or by a certificate generated by one of those root CAs. If there's a way to be even more granular and say this signature came from this exact project, I think that might influence our user experience. That would be an additional data point that we could surface up that might be really interesting.
Yeah, I don't want to rely on trusted CAs because the GitLab trust store is like at the instance level. And so if you add a trusted CA, it's added to the entire instance. And so there's no way right now to make that work for GitLab.com. Because different groups are going to want to trust different CAs, and there's not an environment set up like we have for TLS where there's like a global authority that's trusted by the whole world.
Right.
But cosign doesn't really work like that though. Like if it uses Socio, then the certificate that it creates is completely temporary, and we would have to look in Recore to see what certificate was used to sign that signature and if it was valid at the time that the signature was created. So it's a bit different from like the regular root CA, like X509 root CA. There's a few extra steps.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I agree about that limitation about root CAs, because yeah, that's at the instance level. I think that might be a place to start. And then definitely we want to have support for full CO signing as well. So it sounds like we might need to do some extra work to support that. Presumably,
I think if you want to add like trusted, if you want users to be able to specify what they trust, like a private key or a root CA, I think they should be able to add that into the project settings rather than using like a global trust store. Because I think that's really bad because it's also used for other stuff in GitLab, like for external TLS connection and stuff like that. So it's already used for different things. And I think if we reuse that same trust store for other stuff, it's going to introduce vulnerabilities like cross-protocol attacks. So I don't think we should use that. I think we should have something completely separate.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. Okay, yeah, I'm in agreement with that. I mean, the real thing that we want to be able to verify is when users are signing images as part of building the image in our runner. And most especially, we want to support this out of the box configuration. So if they do use Fulcio to sign something in our runner, we would want that to show up as verified. So maybe we don't worry about those instance level trusted root CAs and we just focus on adding Fulcio support to begin with. If that makes it easier, I don't know.
Yeah, I think starting with Fulcio should make sense. And we should be able to reuse that for everything else that uses Fulcio and is kind of like cosine related.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But do we still need some way, you're saying we still need some way then at the group level for users to identify trusted root CAs? Because we would be checking Rector and Fulcio to get the cert and to identify the time that it was signed. But would we still need to validate that against a trusted root CA?
I think so. I think if we start with Fulcio, then we shouldn't need to do anything else. We should be able to verify against Fulcio's ORDC claims, which is it could be anything that's in the CI job token. So do you mind if I share my screen real quick?
Yeah, sure. One sec. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is a draft MR that they have on the Fulcio project to support the GitLab JWT. And so we could verify based off of basically anything that's in here. Maybe we could even let users define custom rules. So we could say, I want to make sure that this container image was built inside our organization's namespace. Or they could say, I want to make sure that this image was built in a pipeline for this project on the main branch or on a protected branch. So there's multiple different things that you could verify with this. And I'm not sure what the sensible default would be.
I think a sensible default would be to just verify the trusted OIDC claim. And then all of those details are things that we could show in that signature details pane, at least for this first step. That's my opinion.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, I think anyway, where people aren't going to be, if people want to have like verification for this, they're not going to have it in GitLab. They're going to have it like on their Kubernetes cluster using an emission controller or something like that.
Yeah, I agree about that. I mean, I think in GitLab, if we can just show that it was signed by a trusted identity, that's enough for the MVC. All right, yeah, great questions there. I'll document that afterwards in the epic. Are there any other points that we need to discuss or other questions here?
I did have a question on what I could start on. So I think initially off the bat, I need to familiarize myself with the container registry, how to use it and whatnot. But I was wondering, once I've taken care of that, is there like anything I could get started on right away, or do we wait for backend?
I would think that you could start developing some of this just behind a feature flag, maybe even with mocked data. But I mean, my understanding was you were going to need an extra few weeks anyway before you started, and that might work out better to give the back end a little bit of a chance to get started ahead of you. But if you wanted to get started right away, I think you could look at those mocks there and start developing the front end out ahead of the back end just behind a feature flag.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll have to talk with Neil about the scheduling, but just wanted to get an idea of what I could start on. And also do we have a timeline for when we would like this feature to be out by?
So we don't have a good timeline yet because we still need to do refinement and break down the epic and figure out our implementation plan. So I don't know. Right now, my guess is as good as yours as to how long it's going to take. But I think we'll have a better idea soon. Our first task here is going to be just to refine it and to break everything down into implementation issues. So actually, I said you could start development, but probably the first step is to create the front end issues and tasks and implementation plan before that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, even the backend is not going to be able to start right away. We're going to have to figure out the refinement first and create all the issues.
Cool. That's it for me.
Okay.
I guess I have a similar
please.
question. How can I best help with the refinement from the back end?
I'm not sure. So we in my groups, typically we would have the DRI do the refinement and create the implementation issues. You know, one thing that I could do is I could create the implementation issues, and then I could ask you to review them and see if the implementation plan makes sense. Like that, would you like to do that?
Yeah, I think that sounds good. So I guess to start off, I'll just get some more context into the container registry and try to see how things are implemented, and then I guess we can go from there and collaborate on the implementation plans.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to do that too. I need to figure out like how their database is set up and how that relates to the images. So we've all got some research to do, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and please feel free to reach out to the existing container registry team, especially where they've made someone available as an advisor for us. I'm hoping that will help reduce the learning curve. They seem to think that there was a lot to learn and that it was a pretty strong learning curve. So, you know, we want to avoid spending like 3 months just coming up to speed on their back end by, using the advisor that they've made available to us.
So I guess on that, how are we going to share all the information? Because we'll be learning different parts at different times and just making sure that everyone is all coming up to speed at the same time. Do we have any thoughts on that?
Maybe to start off with, we could organize a call with one of the team members in the container registry and they could give us like a high level walkthrough. And whoever is on the call can see that. We could record that for people who can't make the call. I feel like that's a good jumping off point.
Yeah, I bet they also have documentation somewhere. So I'll try asking them and see if I can find anything.
All right, so yeah, that sounds good. Brian, are you planning on talking with individuals? Are you planning on having everyone work on this first? How do we want to split this out with the next item, which is the spike for doing the signing of build artifacts? Do you have any thoughts on how to organize the work here?
So I will talk with the container. I'll drop by the container registry groups channel and see if I can find any resources from them, and I'll share those back with the group. Also, I'll start doing the refinement on the epic and creating the implementation issues. And so once I have those, I can ask Ellie to have a look at them. That might take a little while though, because I have to do the research too. So I'll share the resources and we can all kind of research it together and figure out what to do from there. We also have Chris from Google on the call here. He's kind of been looking the whole time. I wanted to ask and see what he thinks about this, because I think having an external perspective is really valuable. So Chris, you might not have the context, but based on what you've seen on the call, does what we're doing seem to make sense?
Full disclosure, I'm mainly here for the native signing of build artifacts, so I've only been paying limited attention to the first part. Sorry.
That's okay.
No worries.
All right, well, we are practically at time, so yeah, let's go ahead and move on to this next part. I have a lot less to say about this one other than, right now, I think when we first started down this path, it seemed like it was going to be a fairly simple problem. And as we explored it more, we quickly realized that, not surprisingly, signing things is much more difficult than we initially thought. So at a very high level, our goal here is, most likely we'll be using the SigStore tooling. So most likely we'll be using things like Fulkio and possibly Cosign as well to actually do the signing. But the idea is to use the runner's OIDC identity to sign build artifacts and container images and packages that are built in GitLab by default. And the nice thing about signing is that it's additive, right? So if somebody else wants to sign it with their own private key, they can come along and sign it as well. But just having that initial signing happen by default out of the box for anything that's built on GitLab, that's sort of the end state vision. Getting into the details of how do we then move forward with giving the runner an OIDC identity, and how do we securely transfer any tokens or credentials that are required for that? back and forth between the GitLab server, which is an identity provider, and the runner, those start to become a little bit more complicated and nuanced. And so that's why for this one, we're not even trying to move into implementation. We're just starting this out with a generic research spike. There's a lot of context in linked threads and other discussions that have happened in the past. But at a high level here, we're just trying to figure out how can we get to that end state? Do we want to do some things in the middle, like to have good iteration and to move towards it incrementally? What is it that needs to be done? So that's what this research spike is just to go explore those unknowns and help us start to put together a plan on how we can move forward.
Yes, so I'm a bit skeptical about the native signing because there's no standardization for it, and that's really important. So I see Chris has his hand raised. I'm gonna let him talk like as soon as I finish this. But the things we can use cosign, and we can do kind of the same verification that I talked about earlier, where you can verify like a group or a project, a branch, etc. The thing is since there's no standardization, people would have to write their own verifiers and basically write their own code to verify those signatures and those claims. And I don't think that's going to work very well. So there's like nothing in the ecosystem right now to support verification of those signatures. And I think that, Chris, did you want to say something?
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna do my sales pitch for Salsa now, which was like you gave a good introduction. So there is a standard for generating build provenance, which is not exactly code signing, but very closely related. And the standard is pretty well developed. It is reaching its 1.0 release sometime in the next couple of weeks. And so I think that could be a great format for you to use to meet the most of the same goals as straight up code signing. There is also a Salsa verifier tool that is up on GitHub. The community contributes to it, and you could put your all of the metadata needed into that tool to verify your signatures. So there is actually a framework and some infrastructure that you can build this feature on top of. And I'm here because I want to see Salsa be successful, and it would be great if we could convince you to adopt it.
Yeah, I think we definitely want to be producing like Salsa compliant attestations. I guess maybe I'm not 100% clear on the full level of overlap there, but I think what you're saying is we would produce the Salsa compliant attestation, and then we would sign that attestation as part of generating it. And that would be the thing that we would be verifying. Is that a fair summary?
That's correct. And the attestation contains a digest of the built artifact. So you
Right.
Yeah, and I've been researching it. I'm not totally familiar with Salsa and the in total format, but I've been researching it, and the more I read, the more I think that this is kind of solving some of the exact same problems. And it's also really flexible. So I think there's some room for people to kind of build their own solutions. But in general, I think it would probably be more worthwhile to keep improving on the in toto attestations and try to build on Salsa than to do like raw signing of build artifacts.
Just real quick, I recognize we're over time here. I can stay on and the meeting will be recorded, but for anyone who has to drop off, please don't feel shy about doing so.
I'll drop off. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, so I mean, I think that makes sense to go down that route. I don't understand enough of the nuances myself, but at least right now our plan is just to do a big research spike into this area to see if we can find a path forward. So I don't know, does that give us at least enough to go on for somebody to pick up that research spike and start investigating, or do we have other big questions that still need to be answered?
A research spec for what?
Into the signing. So that the spike that's linked up at the top of 2B.
I guess I'm not sure what would be our expected outcome of that. Like, what's our end goal?
Yeah, so my hope for this would be that we come out of it having a path forward, you know, a very high level architecture of how we might be able to achieve this automatic signing. Maybe the answer is just that we produce a SALSA attestation and sign that. Maybe it's that we sign the build artifact itself, but it'd be like a really high level architecture on how we can move forward. That would be the outcome.
Okay. Yeah, we can do that. I think we might end up going back and forth a little bit, but I do want to refine that a bit more. One thing that I just think is really important is that I think we shouldn't be inventing our own thing in terms of the cryptography. I feel like we're doomed to fail if we do that. So I really want to rely on an existing standard for any of these cryptographic signatures and verification stuff.
Yeah, I agree with that. We don't want to be in the business of rolling our own cryptography.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the bigger question is for this research spike is more about how can we embed, you know, presumably full PO and cosign into the runner. How can we do that securely without compromising any credentials? And how can we use that to produce a signed attestation that can then be verified later on?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a little bit already. I think the runner has like hidden CI job. So when the runner uploads artifacts at the end, it actually creates a separate CI job that runs a separate container. It does the upload. So I think it's already able to do stuff like that, where we don't need to actually embed software in a runner. It can just basically run a CI job that's internal, and it can have anything inside that image that it needs.
Okay, yeah, so I mean, I think all of those questions we'd work out in the research spike, you know, whether we do embed the software, whether it's a separate CI job, how does it create an OIDC identity? How does it, you know, use that identity to create a JWT token? How does it then use that token to create a secret key with Fulcio that's used to then sign the image? I mean, I think all of those things we'd need to work out as part of the research spike. Okay, so I know we ended up having them, we're way over time at this point, but a couple other things. We have a larger than anticipated team. Maybe we want to go work on the package registry in parallel, maybe not. I know the package registry is a little bit more complicated because there are more ecosystems there. But that's sort of just an open question for the group. If we have more people than are needed for these two items, maybe we spin up another effort in parallel. It's probably not a question we need to answer now, but it's more of just a note right now, and we can add that as needed later on. Okay, and I can take this last one async. I think maybe we can discuss the meeting schedule and cadence in Slack instead. So that would bring us to the end of our agenda today. Is there anything else that anyone would like to discuss? All right, well, thanks everyone. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks, everybody.